It was a Sunday afternoon when I first caught her in a lie. Anyway, I'd come home early from a business trip, expecting to surprise my wife, Emily. You know how you get that feeling when you've been away for a few days and you just want to come back, make dinner together, watch a movie, maybe spend some quality time with your wife? Nothing special, just normal. But that day, I walked into something I didn't expect. The garage door was open when I pulled into the driveway. Usually, Emily would be inside, playing with the kids or getting things ready for dinner. But today, nothing. The house was silent. Too silent. I pushed open the door and walked into the kitchen. That's when I saw it. Emily was standing there, talking to Richard. She was laughing, and not the kind of polite laugh you share with someone you've known for years. No, this was different. There was an intimacy in her laugh that made my blood run cold. Richard, my old buddy, my family friend, was standing close to her, too close, his hand resting casually on her arm. And there was something in the way they were looking at each other. Something that felt off. I stood there for a second, watching them, my mind spinning. Had I really just walked in on this? Was I overreacting? I've never been a jealous type. But this was something else. The way Richard looked at her, almost possessive, sent a chill through me. It wasn't how friends look at each other. And the worst part? Emily didn't even notice me standing there. She didn't hear the door, or maybe she didn't care. Finally, she looked over and saw me. And that's when the smile faded from her face. "Oh, hey," she said, the nervousness creeping into her voice. "I didn't know you were back so early." Richard, seeing the shift in the air, quickly made an excuse. "I'll let you two get settled," he said, giving me a pat on the back that was just a little too familiar. "Good seeing you, James." Then he turned and left, but not before I caught that last look. A glance at Emily, something unspoken. I stood there, staring at Emily as she tried to act normal. But I could see it in her eyes. She knew. She knew what I had seen, and she didn't know how to cover it up. I'm James, a guy who built a business from scratch. I'm not the kind of man who lets his emotions run the show. I'm practical, straightforward. Hell, my whole life has been built on routine. I got into business young and worked my ass off. But everything changed when I met Emily. She was different from other women I'd dated. She wasn't flashy. She didn't need to be. We were perfect together. Me with my ambition and her with her steady, calm demeanor. She was my rock, the one who kept everything in line while I focused on building my empire. We got married when I was 31, and everything felt like it was falling into place. We had kids, bought a house in a quiet neighborhood, and built what I thought was a perfect life. But even in all this routine, something felt off now. I trusted Emily. I had to trust her. We were supposed to be solid, a team. But today, as I stood in the kitchen, watching Richard walk out the door with a grin on his face, I felt that knot in my gut. Something wasn't right. I didn't yell, didn't cause a scene. I just sat there, letting Emily stew in her own guilt. When she came in to talk, I could see she was trying to act normal. But there was no normal about it. "James," she started. "What's going on? You're quiet." I looked at her. Quiet? Oh, I was far from quiet. I was simmering, watching her, waiting for the truth. "I don't know, Emily," I said, my voice hard. "What was going on back there with Richard? You two look pretty cozy, don't you think?" She froze. I saw the panic flash in her eyes. She knew. He's been helping me with some stuff," she said quickly, her voice shaky. "It's nothing like you're thinking." I didn't buy it. I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't going to play along like everything was fine. The words came out of me before I could stop them. "No, I'm not stupid." "What's going on, Emily?" She sighed, clearly realizing she wasn't going to get away with brushing me off. "James, it's nothing, okay? It was just a friendly moment. Nothing happened." "Nothing happened?" I repeated, standing up now. I was getting angry. "Then why the hell do you look guilty every time I bring it up? Why the hell was Richard so damn comfortable with you today?" Her face went pale. I could see the crack in her armor, and damn, it felt good to finally see her sweat. But I didn't stop there. I wasn't going to let her off the hook so easily. I threw my phone on the table. "You don't get it, do you? You think I'm some fool you can lie to? I saw the way you looked at him. I saw the way he touched you." The words were like daggers, and Emily flinched, but instead of breaking down in tears or begging for forgiveness, she took a step back, shaking her head. "You're overreacting, James," she said softly, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. The guilt was too obvious. You're imagining things. Richard's just, don't lie to me. I cut her off. I'm not some idiot who doesn't see the signs. I didn't care if she was my wife. I was done pretending everything was fine. I was done letting her play me like a fool. I'm not the kind of guy to cry or beg for answers. I don't sit around hoping people will change. If I've learned anything in my life, it's that when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And Emily? She'd shown me enough. I didn't need to wait for some big dramatic confession. What I needed was to find the truth. I needed to see where this betrayal had gone, how far she'd let it spiral. And I was going to make sure Richard knew exactly what it felt like to mess with me. So yeah, maybe I was pissed. Maybe I was going to confront her. But I was ready to take control of this situation, whether she liked it or not. No more games. I couldn't get that image out of my head. Richard's hand on Emily's arm. The way they had looked at each other, like they shared something no one else was supposed to see. The way his touch lingered. That smug, self-assured smile he gave me as he walked out the door. Something inside me snapped, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to play the fool any longer. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Emily. I had no choice. Every time she came near me, I could feel the weight of the lies hanging between us. I couldn't stand it. I was so damn angry I couldn't think straight, but I knew I needed something solid, something undeniable. Proof. I had to make her feel what I was feeling, betrayed, humiliated, disgusted. I wasn't going to beg for answers. I wasn't going to be that pathetic man who stands by, waiting for his wife to confess her sins. No, I was going to force her to face the consequences. It was a Friday when it finally happened. I had been out on a business trip for most of the week. Emily said she had some things to take care of with the kids. Nothing unusual there. I came back earlier than I had planned, caught a flight back in the morning, thinking I might surprise her. But this wasn't going to be a happy surprise. When I walked into the house, I expected to find Emily in the kitchen or the living room, maybe even the kids playing in the backyard. Instead, it was silent. Too silent. I walked through the front door, and the first thing I noticed was the faint sound of a door creaking open, followed by the soft thud of footsteps from upstairs. I paused for a moment. Where the hell was she? I made my way upstairs slowly, almost without thinking. The house felt cold, almost vacant. But then I heard it again. This time, I could tell it was coming from our bedroom. Without thinking, I pushed open the door. There on the bed was her phone, and the screen was lit up. At first, I thought it was nothing. Maybe a text, maybe a call. But when I saw the name that flashed on the screen, I felt my stomach drop to my feet. It was from her Richard, my so-called friend. My heart hammered against my chest as I picked up the phone, barely able to breathe. The message was short, but the meaning was clear. Can't wait to see you tonight. I stood there in shock for a moment, the words burning in my brain. I can't wait to see you tonight. No business meeting. No helping with the kids. No excuses. Just her and him. I threw the phone down on the bed like it had burned me. My anger rose up inside me. And this time, I wasn't going to pretend. I wasn't going to calmly ask questions, pretending everything was fine. I stormed downstairs, grabbed my coat, and left the house without even looking back. I needed answers. No more waiting around. No more acting like everything was fine. I needed to confront both of them, Emily and Richard. But I wasn't going to give them the luxury of a private confession. I needed them to know how much pain they had caused, how much damage they had done, not just to me, but to everything I had worked for. I dialed Richard's number. I didn't hesitate. He picked up on the second ring. "James," he said, his voice as bright and casual as always. Too damn casual. "What's going on, man?" I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I know what's going on. With you. And Emily. You think I don't see it?" I bit each word off like it was a poison. "You've been screwing my wife, Richard. And I want you to know, I'm done with the lies. You're going to come clean to her tonight. To me. No more excuses." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him shifting, trying to come up with something, but he couldn't. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice faltering for the first time in all the years I had known him. "James, listen. I never meant for it to." I cut him off. "Don't lie to me. I don't want to hear it. I've already seen enough." And with that, I hung up. I didn't need any more answers from him. He had said everything by staying silent. That evening, I got home early. I didn't want to wait around for Emily to come up with some half-baked excuse. I wasn't going to let her play the innocent wife. Not anymore. When Emily walked in the door, she froze. Her eyes went wide as she took in my expression, the tense silence that filled the room. I didn't speak at first. I just looked at her. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. I didn't let her. "I know, Emily," I said, my voice low, steady but full of venom. "I know everything. I found the messages. The phone. Don't think I'm some idiot who doesn't see what's been going on behind my back." She froze, her face going pale, her eyes darting back and forth as if she was searching for the right words. But I wasn't about to let her come up with another lie. "I don't want your excuses. I don't want to hear you tell me how it just happened, or that I'm overreacting. What I want to hear is the truth. And I want it now." She started to speak, her voice breaking. "James, I didn't mean for this to happen. It's not what you think." I scoffed. "Not what I think? Really? You're standing there telling me it's not what I think when I have the messages, I have everything. I'm done with your lies, Emily. I don't care what you think you can say to make this go away. You and Richard, you've been screwing each other for God knows how long, and now I'm supposed to pretend everything's fine?" Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't feel a shred of pity for her. None. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I knew exactly who it was. I opened the door without hesitation. Richard stood there, looking as uncomfortable as a man could possibly look. His eyes shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't say a word. "Come in," I said, and my voice was like steel. He stepped inside, and I didn't even let him speak. "You think you can just walk into my house like everything's fine, don't you?" I said. "You think I don't know what's been going on with you and my wife? Well, here's the thing, Richard. I don't need your apologies. I don't need anything from you anymore. You and Emily will both face the consequences of what you've done to me. I'm done with it." Emily opened her mouth to say something, but I raised my hand to silence her. "No more. You've had your chance to explain. I'm through listening." She looked at me, her face pale and desperate, but I wasn't giving her a way out. I turned back to Richard. "You think I'm just going to forget about this? Think again. You can't just walk away from this like it's nothing. This is my life you've been playing with." Richard's eyes flickered with shame, but I didn't care. I was done being the nice guy. I was done being the fool. Tonight, it was time for them both to understand exactly what they had done, and there was no going back. The weight of their lies hung heavily in the air between us. Richard, my so-called friend, and Emily, the woman I had trusted most in the world, were standing there, broken and silent. It was clear as day that neither of them had anything left to say. They could apologize, make excuses, cry even, but it wouldn't change what I knew. It wouldn't change the fact that they had destroyed everything I had worked for. I was done with the games. Done with pretending I didn't see the obvious. Done with allowing them to live their comfortable lives while they tore apart mine. "You want to explain yourself, Emily?" My voice was cold. I wasn't looking for her to say sorry. I wasn't even interested in hearing her reasons anymore. This wasn't about understanding her. It was about making her feel the weight of what she'd done. She opened her mouth, trying to find the words, but they just weren't there. I could see it in her eyes. She knew. She had been caught, and there was no getting away from it. No more pretending. No more talking her way out of it. This wasn't going to be some emotional confession where I forgave her, and we moved on. She had crossed the line, and there was no coming back from it. I turned to Richard. He stood there, his shoulders slumped in defeat, but I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry he'd been caught. Sorry his perfect little life was now crumbling. "You think I'm just going to let this slide, Richard?" I asked, my voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just waltz in here, smile, play the charming friend, and walk away with nothing? Well, you're wrong." He shifted uncomfortably, his face reddening. He opened his mouth, probably to try and apologize, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. "I don't need your fake remorse. I don't need you to beg for forgiveness," I said, my tone sharp, cutting him off. "What I need, Richard, is for you to understand one thing." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. The rage was still there, bubbling beneath the surface, But it wasn't just anger anymore. I had a plan, a cold, calculated plan that would make them both feel the pain they'd caused me. You've ruined everything I've worked for, Richard. You've humiliated me. You've ruined my family. And I won't let you walk away from this. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. You won't get to hide behind that charm anymore. I turned back to Emily. Her face was pale now, her lips trembling. She wanted to say something, probably something about how sorry she was or how much she loved me. But I didn't want to hear it. And you, Emily, I said, my voice low and full of quiet fury. You think I'm going to forgive you for this? For destroying everything we built? You can cry all you want. You can apologize, but it's not going to change what you did. The guilt was eating at her now. She had been holding it together, but now the tears were flowing freely. She reached out, as if to touch me, but I stepped back. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. Not this time. I had a plan in my head, a revenge plan, and it wasn't just about humiliating them in front of family or friends. It wasn't just about shouting and fighting. I wasn't going to be some emotional wreck over this. No, I was going to make sure they felt this loss in every part of their lives. This wasn't about me. This was about them. I started by taking control of everything. I wasn't going to give either of them the comfort of slipping away into their normal lives. Not without facing the consequences. The next day, I met with a lawyer. I wasn't fooling around. The divorce was going to happen, and it was going to be messy. I knew that. Emily would try to fight it. She'd probably even try to win back some sympathy, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her have anything she wanted. I'm not going to play nice. I told my lawyer, my jaw clenched. I'm taking everything. I want her out, and I want Richard to understand that I won't let him get away with this either. The lawyer looked at me with raised eyebrows, but he didn't question me. He knew the kind of man I was, and he knew the kind of damage I could do. I wasn't just going to go after the house. I wasn't going to settle for basic financial compensation. No, I wanted more. I was going to destroy Richard's reputation, make sure everyone knew what he had done. I was going to make sure that no one in our social circle, no one in his professional life, could look at him the same way again. I started talking to people, close friends, family, anyone who could help. People who knew Emily and Richard for the lying, cheating people they were. I went to Richard's work next. I knew he had a good standing with the higher-ups, and I was going to make sure they understood exactly who they were dealing with. I wasn't going to just let him keep his job while he betrayed me. I made sure to get in touch with some key people, mutual acquaintances who could help spread the word. Richard's been having an affair with my wife. I told them directly. I think you need to know who you're dealing with. By the time I was done, I knew Richard's reputation in that office would never be the same. His smooth-talking, charming persona would be questioned by every colleague. Every friend of his who had ever looked at him with admiration would now wonder what else he'd been hiding. The day I filed for divorce, I arranged a family gathering, a dinner at my house. It was a carefully planned event. I wasn't going to let Emily hide behind excuses anymore. I was going to expose her, expose both of them. I invited our families, everyone who had been part of our lives for years, people who had seen us as the picture-perfect couple. I knew that once they knew the truth, Emily would have no more friends left in this town. She'd be alone, just like she had left me alone. The dinner started innocently enough. We all sat down, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Emily kept looking at me nervously, and I could see Richard squirming in his seat. But neither of them had any idea what was coming. At the perfect moment, I stood up. Everyone went quiet, probably expecting me to give a toast, but instead, I pulled out a folder. I think everyone here should know the truth, I said, my voice steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of the divorce papers, the ones that were already filed. I wasn't waiting for her to speak. I wasn't waiting for Richard to apologize. This was my moment. I'm done. Emily and Richard have been having an affair for months, and it's time for all of you to know. I could see Emily's face go white. Her eyes filled with shock and shame, but she didn't speak. She didn't even try to defend herself. Richard, on the other hand, stood up too quickly, knocking his chair over in the process. He opened his mouth to say something, probably another fake apology, but I didn't give him the chance. It's done, Richard, I said, my voice firm and unwavering. You'll never be the same after this. I watched as Richard's expression faltered, his world crumbling before him. The smirk that had been permanently etched on his face was gone now. In its place was a man who had just realized he had lost everything. It wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about them facing consequences. Richard lost his job. Emily lost her social circle. Neither of them could escape the consequences of their betrayal. Everyone knew. The truth was out. Emily tried to reach out. She sent me letters, tried calling, even had her friends plead with me. But it didn't matter. She could apologize all she wanted, but the damage was done. There was nothing left between us. I focused on rebuilding my life. I focused on the things that mattered. My kids, my work, and finding peace. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I had gotten what I wanted. I had made them both face the truth. The aftermath of the public reveal was quiet, too quiet. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. It was as though a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted. It wasn't that I was relieved. I wasn't ready to call it closure yet. But I had done what I set out to do. Emily and Richard were both exposed, and the world now knew the truth. But even after all the destruction, something gnawed at me. Some part of me, the part that had been manipulated, betrayed, humiliated, wasn't satisfied. I had torn them down, sure. But had I really won? Was this really the victory I thought it would be? The first few weeks after everything went public were strange. I went through the motions, working, spending time with my kids, trying to rebuild what was left of my life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something still needed to be done. It wasn't over. Not really. One night, a few weeks after the family dinner, Emily showed up at my door. I wasn't expecting it. I was sitting in my living room, just finishing dinner with my kids when I heard the knock. At first, I thought it was some friend of mine, or maybe one of the neighbors. But then I opened the door, and there she was, Emily. Her face was tear-streaked, her eyes red from crying. I didn't have to ask her what she wanted. I knew. I could see it in her eyes, the desperation, the shame. But there was something else too, a coldness. She wasn't just looking for forgiveness. She was looking for something more. I need to talk to you, James, she said, her voice breaking as she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. I didn't stop her. I couldn't be bothered to play games anymore. If she wanted to talk, I'd let her talk. We sat at the kitchen table, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. I watched her try to steady herself, her hands trembling as she wiped her face. The weight of everything that had happened seemed to crash down on her now. But that wasn't what interested me. I had seen this look before. The pleading, the regret. She'd been trying to salvage something ever since the truth came out. But there was no going back. I know you're angry, she began, her voice cracking. I know I ruined everything. I was stupid. I was selfish. I was looking for something I thought I needed, and I ruined us. I ruined everything we had. I didn't interrupt. I let her speak, but I could already feel myself closing off. What was the point in listening to her anymore? She took a deep breath, then spoke again. I'm not asking you to forgive me, James, she said, her eyes meeting mine for the first time since she walked through the door. I don't know how to fix what I did. I don't know how to live with myself, knowing that I betrayed you like this. There was the apology, the final desperate plea for absolution. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I'm done listening to your excuses, Emily, I said, my voice sharp. You don't get to come here and expect me to forgive you. You don't get to play the victim after everything you've done. I'm not some fool who's going to fall for your charm again. Her face fell. She had expected this. But she wasn't done. James, please. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I can change, that I can make this right somehow. She stood up, her voice rising in desperation. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to fix it. Don't you want to see me try? I stood up too, the anger bubbling again. I took a few steps toward her, not getting too close, but enough to make her realize I wasn't backing down. I don't need you to try, Emily, I said coldly. I needed you to be the woman I married, not the one who ran off with my best friend. I'm done with your chances. You had every chance you needed. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. I'm not letting you back into my life. I'm not letting you manipulate me anymore. It's over. I don't care if you think you can change. You had your shot, and you blew it. Her face crumbled. I could see the defeat in her eyes. This wasn't the outcome she had hoped for. She wasn't going to get the soft forgiveness she had expected. She wasn't going to get the sympathy she was after. I had already made my peace with what had happened. I had moved on. But Emily wasn't the only one who had tried to salvage something from the wreckage. As if to make sure I didn't forget about him, Richard called me the next day. I had been expecting it. I knew he'd come around. He was probably looking for a chance to apologize, to offer a weak excuse, and hope I'd let him off the hook. But I wasn't interested in hearing his lies. When I picked up the phone, his voice came through, shaky, but with a false bravado I had seen in him before. "James," he said, his tone hesitant, "I know I've messed up, and I know there's no way to take back what happened. But I want to be clear. I never meant to hurt you." I laughed, the sound bitter and cold. "Oh, really? You didn't mean to hurt me? You didn't mean to destroy my life? You didn't mean to sleep with my wife, Richard? Is that what you're telling me?" He didn't answer at first, and for a moment I thought he might hang up. But he didn't. He just kept trying to play the victim. "I know I've lost your trust," he said quietly, "but if there's any chance we can fix this—" "Fix this?" I interrupted. "You think you can fix this, Richard? After what you've done? You've ruined everything. You've ruined us. You think I'm going to just sweep it under the rug because you're sorry now?" He went silent for a long time. The guilt and regret were obvious now, but it didn't change anything. "I'm not interested in your apology," I told him, my voice icy. "You don't get to come crawling back into my life. You're not my friend anymore. You've shown me who you are, and you can't undo that. You've ruined both of our lives, Richard, and now you'll pay the price." The line went quiet. I knew he was trying to figure out what to say next, but there was nothing left to say. This wasn't about forgiveness. This wasn't about trying to make things work. It was about consequences. "Goodbye, Richard," I said and hung up. The months after everything came to light weren't easy. Divorce papers were filed, and the process was draining. But it was necessary. I knew what I had to do. Emily was gone. Richard was gone, and it was time to rebuild. But something had changed inside me. The old James was dead. I had been the man who trusted, who believed that loyalty and love could fix anything. Now I was a man who had learned the hard way. I had learned that people lie, that people betray, and that even the closest friends can be the ones who hurt you the most. I took up new projects. I spent time focusing on my kids, on work, on things that truly mattered. I had been hurt, betrayed, and humiliated, but I was stronger for it. I had survived. I never heard from Emily again. Richard, too, had faded into the background. Both of them had gotten what they deserved. They had lost everything, and in their place, I had found a new sense of freedom. Freedom from the lies, from the betrayal, from the people who thought they could destroy me. The days after Emily's final visit and Richard's failed attempt at redemption passed in a blur. It was as though a veil had been lifted, and I could finally see everything for what it truly was. I wasn't the man I used to be. I wasn't the guy who believed in second chances, in fixing what had been broken, in sweeping things under the rug and moving on with my life. No, I was different now. The truth had cut me deeply, but in that pain, something else had emerged. Strength. Not the kind of strength you hear about in motivational speeches or read in books, but the kind that comes from surviving betrayal, from staring the truth in the face and realizing that, despite it all, you can walk away and stand tall. I knew that things would never go back to how they were. Emily and Richard were no longer part of my world. And even though it wasn't easy, I was done trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I wasn't interested in reconciliation. I wasn't going to let them back in. It wasn't long before the fallout from the public reveal started to ripple outward. People who had known us for years, friends, colleagues, family, started to ask questions. Some were sympathetic. Some were shocked. A few asterisk, mostly people I considered close friends. Asterisk, tried to tell me that maybe things could have been worked out, or that it's all in the past now. But there were others who sided with me. My family had always been close-knit, and they were disgusted by what Emily and Richard had done. They backed me completely. It was almost comforting to have that kind of support, even though it only reinforced the truth of the situation. Emily was no longer welcome at family gatherings. Richard, too, was out. The people who had once been in my life were now strangers. They had chosen their side when they chose to betray me. But it wasn't just the people I had known for years who turned away. Emily's friends, people she had spent so much time with, no longer spoke to her. The shame of being associated with her, after what had happened, was too great. Richard's reputation crumbled, not just in the workplace, but among everyone who had ever admired him. In a way, they both had been cast out of the lives they once enjoyed. Emily, the woman who had stood by my side for over a decade, was now alone, isolated by her own choices. Richard, the man who I had considered a brother, was suddenly nobody. The life they had once had so comfortable, so easy was gone. But it wasn't just about them. I had made sure they knew the consequences of their actions. I wasn't done making them feel the pain they had caused. The first thing I focused on, after everything settled down, was my business. Over the years, I had built it into something I was proud of. But I hadn't realized just how much of my focus had been stolen by Emily and Richard until they were gone. Now, I threw myself back into work with the kind of single-mindedness I had lacked for months. I was strategic in how I approached everything. The public fallout had affected my business's reputation, and I knew it was time to make some moves. I increased my presence in meetings. I reached out to clients I hadn't spoken to in months. I made sure my professional reputation remained solid. I was the man who had been betrayed, yes, but I was also the man who had come out on top. There was no room for weakness. And that's how I moved forward. Not with anger, but with purpose. Every decision I made, every phone call, every meeting was a calculated step toward rebuilding my life. The man who had been wronged was gone, replaced by someone sharper, someone who couldn't be hurt again. The one thing that kept me grounded through all this, the one thing that mattered more than anything else, was my children. I had been so focused on everything else, on the betrayal, on the damage done to my personal life, that I almost lost sight of what was really important. I made sure to prioritize them, to give them the support they needed during such a tumultuous time. They had questions. They had concerns. They didn't understand why things had changed so suddenly. But as much as I wanted to keep the reality of everything from them, I couldn't lie. They deserved the truth, even if it was hard to explain. "I don't want to talk about it," my son Mark said one night as I tried to explain the situation in a way they could understand. He was old enough to know something was off. He knew that Mom wasn't around as much anymore, and that things were different at home. "I know you don't, buddy," I said, kneeling down next to him. "But I want you to know that it's not your fault. What happened with Mom and Richard was something that had nothing to do with you. You don't have to worry. I'll always be here for you, no matter what." It wasn't much, but it was enough. In time, they adjusted. I made sure they felt safe. I made sure they felt loved. That was the only thing that truly mattered now. I wasn't the kind of man who believed in second chances. Not after what I had been through. Emily had destroyed any possibility of trust between us. She had chosen Richard. She had chosen betrayal over loyalty. And now, it was time for her to face the consequences. But even though I had severed ties with both of them, the scar they had left wasn't going to fade immediately. Trust is something that takes years to build and seconds to destroy. That destruction was permanent. I had learned something invaluable from this experience. The world doesn't owe you loyalty. People are fickle, and even the closest of friends can turn into the most brutal of enemies. I had closed myself off from the pain, but I couldn't stop the memories from lingering. The laughter shared with Richard at family dinners. The vacations we took, all three of us, pretending everything was fine. The love I had for Emily. How could it be gone so quickly? How could everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, be so easily shattered by two people I had trusted more than anyone else in the world? But I wasn't going to be consumed by that anger. I wasn't going to waste my life being bitter. I had better things to do. In the months that followed, I started dating again. At first, it felt strange. I hadn't been in the dating world for years, but I soon realized that the things I had feared, starting over, opening up again, were easier than I thought. I met someone. Her name was Kate. She wasn't like Emily. She didn't need me to rescue her. She didn't need me to be anything I wasn't. She was smart, independent, and not afraid to speak her mind. She didn't come with baggage, and most importantly, she didn't try to fix me. It wasn't love at first sight, and it didn't need to be. But it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could trust again. I wasn't the man I had been before, but that didn't mean I was broken. I was stronger. Looking back on everything that had happened, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. The betrayal, the anger, the revenge, it had all led to this. I was a different man now, someone who had been through the fire and come out on the other side. And Emily? She had her life. Richard had his. They had what they wanted, and I had what I needed, peace. It was over. I had moved on, and now I could finally live life on my terms. And as much as it hurt, as much as the scars would never fully fade, I was okay. I had survived. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to what came next.